get there.
Yeah. All right.
Scandalous.
That's what they really want to do anyways.
Oh, yeah.
His name his long help and just don't know how to ask.
Yeah.
Communications.
Give me a medication.
Alright. This isn't covered too heavily on the test. I'll verify it if there's just a couple questions. But it's not covered too heavily on the test as far as like the actual radio systems and stuff like that. Stuff like how to communicate, that's covered more heavily on the test.
But like multiplex, duplex, stuff like that.
Not too much.
Screw it up.
Not too much. So we have lots of different components for a communication system. Of course, as far as communications goes, citizen access, actually, calling 911, that's kind of the entry into the EMS system. This 911 here, that's kind of a newer thing, like past 20 years or so.
911?
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised to find it. It's like mid 80s, I guess. I was really surprised to find that it was as recent an invention. Yeah, I was like, wow, I mean, case of emergency, call 911, right? It's a lot more recent than I expected. Then you have call taking and dispatch, pre-arrival instructions, call coordination, incident reporting, communications from the units to the hospitals or physicians, transfer communications, giving a report to the nurses or doctors or whoever's taking a report at the hospital, communications with other agencies, hospital-to-hospital communications, other communication networks. We'll talk about all that. So, our citizen access, or kind of our detection. How do we find out about calls? People have to call in, obviously. So, this is like I said, your person who needs help calls 911. There's this thing called a PSAP, a Public Safety Answering Point. So down in Austin, when you call 911, it goes to police. Like, first off, and they basically say...
Police, fire, EMS?
Yeah, police, fire, EMS. Which would you want? It happens to be the police that take care of that, but it could be just a random person sitting there. Police, fire, EMS, okay, thank you, and then they push the button to route you through. That's the Public Safety Answering Point concept. There's one number for 3 different emergency services. Police, fire, medical. As far as call taking and dispatch, CAD or CAD is computer aided dispatch. That's really the use of computers to help you dispatch. That can be anything from just having an address and telephone number with a few details entered to using GPS to help coordinate units based on call volume and temporal factors. Basically, you have a peak in call volume at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That means you need to put more ambulances on. You need to move to certain locations. So computer-aided dispatch can be anything from just a little bit of help to kind of managing the entire system. Recorded lines. So anytime you call up to dispatch around here, at least everything's recorded. It used to be on like real tape, cassette tapes, except weird tape that they would be able to pull and play back. Now it's all done digitally. They back it up with DVDs. They can store thousands and thousands of hours of radio traffic, caller information, dispatch type stuff. So when somebody calls in 911, the first thing they ask is what's the phone number so I can call you back in case we get disconnected. It's a phone number first, address first, so they can send somebody. And then they get a phone number in case they get disconnected. First thing they ask about is address and phone number. Then they get that's kind of your essential information. Then they get, okay, tell me about what's going on. Are they conscious, not conscious? Figure out who they need to send. Then they send out alert tones, say you need to go take care of your patient, and tell them where the patient is. This is some older pictures of a dispatch center. Everything now are the nice flat screens, lots of prettier looking computers.
She's actually got paper in front of her yet.
I know, right? There's still paper for taking notes. They do still have little notepads. I did a couple of shifts, I guess, or rode out in the comm center. Not really ride out, but we call it a ride out. It's just what we do.
Would be pretty neat to do that.
It's CTEC? Yeah, it's CTEC. Were you at CTEC? The new CTEC?
Sometimes. Most times there's off of Rutherford Avenue. There's another building.
I got That one room is pretty big.
Yeah.
C-Tech's nice. It's impressive.
I definitely use the notepad though a lot.
C-Tech is a communications
Some kind of-
place in Austin where they have all of the fire, police, EMS, Cat Metro, 311, 411.
301.
Yeah.
401 I think is a separate. It's like a private business.
Oh, okay.
People call us all the time for Pizza Hut. We're like, no, that's
We don't do
401.
that.
We only do
Got
city
it.
stuff.
Got it. Anyway, there are two different kind of positions you can have in EMS dispatching. You can be the one taking the phone calls, or you can be the person managing the ambulances, dispatching, listening them out, getting information, and that
Oh,
sort
they
of
don't
stuff.
do the same. They don't do.
Nope. It doesn't mean that they can't switch off, but they have two different responsibilities. I love this. This is enhanced. It's got a nice teletype terminal looking thing here. Way more advanced than this now. This presentation is quite old. You'll see when we get to the new and emerging technology slide, all of the new and emerging technologies that were new and emerging at the time of this presentation are fully implemented now. So a little bit old on the presentation here. Something to note: ALI, automatic location indicator. So this is based on your phone number, what your location is. This was great when everybody had home phones. They would be associated in the 911 database, the phone number with an address, and it would basically automatically pull up your location based on your phone number. Automatic number indicator is exactly what that says. When you call, it automatically identifies the phone number. It's caller ID. Priority dispatch. I've mentioned this before, the medical priority dispatch concept. Basically, there's a call taker who's got a card set. You can see right here, this card set. That's kind of a predetermined list of questions that they go through based on the call complaint. Theoretically, it saves time and money. Really what it does is it provides dispatchers with an organized system for interrogating callers, figuring out what's going on, and for prioritizing the response. Reduced risk associated with emergency response. It kind of does. It helps you figure out what are your priority calls and what are your high priority calls and your low priority calls. Down in Austin, low priority calls do not get a lights and sirens response. And they get, basically, if you're on a low priority call and there's a higher priority call in the area that you're closest to, you can get reassigned to the higher priority call. So the caller remains on the line. They actually talk to the dispatcher. The dispatcher asks a bunch of questions. Is the patient conscious? Are they breathing? And then a few of these cards have things like CPR instructions, emergency childbirth instructions, bleeding control instructions, anything that a bystander could do that would help whatever situation they're in. Questions about any of that, by the way, so far? So, the next one, call coordination, incident reporting. This is kind of the person sitting at the radio who's dispatching units is usually going to be coordinating, getting information out. So if you call up on the radio and say, hey, I've got this address, but there's nobody here, can you confirm the address for me? Same person kind of doing the same thing, helping relay information back and forth. Helps track incidents, that sort of stuff. Oh, monitor safety. Do you guys know the orange button on the radios?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The orange button on the radios.
Emergency
You ever
traffic.
seen it? Okay, so on all these radios, there's a little orange button. This is the Motorola radios. It's an orange button. I'm not really familiar with any other types of radios. There's a little button on all these radios. It's an emergency ID button. You push, like when you're in the, somebody's holding a gun and saying, don't say anything. They're holding you hostage or something. You push your little ID button and it sends a signal up to dispatch that says, I'm in trouble, help. So that's what your emergency button is. Depending on, I guess, probably on where you are, it does different things. But the Motorola radios, at least the ones in the systems I've worked in, are programmed to basically have open air on that radio, where it basically it's emergent traffic. So it blocks out all the other radio transmissions and says it transmits for like 15 seconds without you having to push the button.
Oh, cool.
So that's what the emergency button is.
So you hit it, and then you could be like, you could repeat something to let them know that you're in
Whoa,
trouble.
sir, put the gun down.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
something
and
like
then
that.
it's like that. Most of the time, it's usually, crap, I just hit the button. It's usually what gets transmitted. Except it's not usually crap. It's usually something else.
We do it
Which you're not supposed to say on the radio.
Mayday training.
Mayday training, yeah. Yep. So yeah, the person who's sitting in kind of this this seat in the dispatch center is also usually responsible for monitoring the system status. You know, if you've only got 2 ambulances left in the entire county, then it's up to the person in charge of monitoring the system to figure out how to manage that. Do you have an ambulance that's going to come available? Do you have usual aid that you can move up? Whatever the response plan is. And then there are also different types of record management as far as recording incidents and recording like call types and call responses and that sort of stuff that allow us to go back and look at the different types of responses. Like if we're looking at chest pain calls, you can go back into these dispatch systems and figure out how many calls were actually dispatched as chest pain, what our response time was to chest pain calls, what our transport priority was to the hospital, how many of them were refusals, that sort of stuff. So, communication between the EMS unit and the hospital physician. Makes sense that this is important, right? We've talked a lot about online medical control, and then actually notifying the hospitals is important too. If you call in with like a patient who's like, you know, having a heart attack and the hospital's like, hey, we're not a STEMI facility, they can send you to another hospital, or a trauma hospital, or a pediatric hospital, or whatever specialized facility. So that's kind of the other piece of information that can come from communication with the hospital.
Shouldn't the unit know that?
They should. They should. One time I transported a STEMI patient. They wanted to go to Seton. Seton already had somebody on the cath lab table, so they weren't going to be able to provide good care. Basically, they have to wait in line. And this guy was sick, like blood pressure of like 60 over 40.
What was the Heart Hospital right across the street?
Exactly. They said, can you go to Heart Hospital? So I was like, yes, we'll go to Heart Hospital. So we did, and they got him right in, and he got good care and all that sort of stuff.
What is this STEMI exactly?
ST elevation MRI. I'll talk about it in cardiology. It's a heart attack. But it's a heart attack
It's a
that's
certain
evident.
presentation.
Yeah, it's a heart attack that's evident on the 12 lead.
Okay.
Which is indicative of like a certain part of the heart, right?
You can sort of figure out what part of the heart it is.
Sort of narrow it down.
You can narrow it down, yes. Yes, you can. That's a whole like semester class, so it's hard to
Studies
read.
or just cardiology?
Just cardiology in general.
That's what we're
Cardiology
doing
in
next
general, but-
semester, right?
Yeah.
The whole semester?
It's
I thought it was
half
half
the semester.
No, it's second.
Yeah, it's second semester.
Oh, okay.
Second semester.
Are we having the same teacher the entire year?
I don't know.
I know we asked that at the beginning, but
I don't know.
I thought you were.
That's still up in the air.
Okay.
Still trying to figure that out.
Okay.
I will make no promises.
Okay.
It'll be either me or Jason.
Jason.
Jason Valdez.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. Anyway, moving on. Transfer communication. So there's actually been some research, a lot of research done on transferring care. And not just from paramedics, like from the field to the ER, but from nurses in the ER to the nurses in the ICU, for example. There's a lot of mistakes and a lot of stuff that gets left out of reports. And it can potentially affect patient care. If you forget to tell your nurse, for example, that you gave a particular medication, or you gave pain medication, and the patient's like, oh, I'm still in pain, and then they give them, you know, a ton more pain medication, that's a problem. And it may be that you documented it fine in your report, but they don't take the time to look at the report. So this whole transfer of patient care, not only is it essential for legal transfer, you have to give a verbal report to the people that you're transferring care to, but it's really important for continuity of patient care. Support agencies. So this would be like you spawn on the ambulance and you have a fire department coming with you or a police department coming with you. And it depends on where you are who can talk to who. In Austin, I could talk to the fire department on the same channel. We all moved to the same channel, but police had their whole separate, unique set of channels, and we were never supposed to go and talk to them. Even though we could scan through, like we had the radio channels on our radios, we were able to move and listen. They didn't want us talking on the channels because they still use 10 codes and stuff, and we don't. Anybody know what 10 codes are?
I don't know what they are.
Yeah,
actually.
but
I know
you know
50.
conceptually. Conceptually, 10 codes are basically like 23 is on scene or something. I can't remember what drunk is. I used to know like all of
50
them.
is the accident.
Right.
yeah, they use that. They like 10 and then another number, and it'll mean something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of numbers that mean different things, and I don't know.
Yeah, we're the same way. in Round Rock.
Yep. I think that's
We
Williamson
share
County.
with Williams County, but then we don't get on that.
And they're not supposed to change codes, but every once in a while, you know, the dispatchers just have it and she'll
Mhm.
say,
Yeah. Well, and then the Williamson County dispatchers dispatch everybody. And it's the same person monitoring the same thing. Like they're monitoring EMS, fire, and police all at the same time.
oh, okay.
So a lot of times they'll just get confused moving back and forth, and they'll start using 10 codes with the police first, and then
But our city, our Round Rock has our own police and fire
We do.
dispatch. And it's
We do.
different from the county.
yes, Cedar Park has their own police and fire dispatch as well. I think most of the cities have their own police dispatch.
Probably.
I have no idea.
That would make sense.
I know Leander does, Cedar Park does.
Has their own police.
Police, yeah. And Cedar Park Fire uses the police dispatch.
So every once in a while, we'll get come out to a call and the ambulance will already be there. We're like, what the heck? This county got it first.
Yep. Depends on where it is. So hospital to hospital, it is possible for hospitals to communicate the way it's set up in Austin anyway, and I think it's consistent with Williamson County. It's all the same radio channel setup. It's just a bank of radio channels that are specific hospital channels, and so the radios just have to be programmed to have the hospital channel. You can switch over and you can talk hospital to hospital. Not particularly common. If they're going to do a patient transfer, they don't really like the radios. They just pick up a phone and call. Hey, send a patient over. They don't report over the radio. More importantly, in a disaster situation, if there is a massive, huge mass casualty incident, lots of patients that are going to lots of different hospitals, it can be used to help coordinate, but that's rarely used. Other communication networks, there's amateur radio. I'm not really familiar with the amateur radio or the CB radio. They're out there. People can get these CB radios and talk back and forth to each other. Commercial broadcasts like radio, television, you turn on whatever device you have and it gets sound or video, and it can be some sort of broadcast. Business radio like taxis, trucking firms, they have radio systems as well. Here's a neat picture of a mobile communication center. Williamson County just got a new one, and then Austin has one as well. They're kind of cool. They've got a nice, I like this. They have the pictures of the radios, but right in the back here you can see the big fridge. I think it's actually just a cabinet. But they do generally actually have like a small fridge, usually microwave. They had the Williamson County one, I guess it was last year around this time, they had all the fires over in Leander. So I was taking my husband food several times over to this mobile command center, which is actually really nice. It's really air conditioned, bathroom. It's nice. The idea behind these is that you can take this whole bus full of electronics out to a remote location. It has a repeater on it, which we'll talk about repeaters. It has several different radios that you can monitor and talk on multiple different channels pretty easily. And it usually comes staffed with somebody who can help with all of your radio needs. So if you have mutual aid coming in from different counties, for example, not everybody's on the same radio system, not everybody has the same radio channels. So they can use some of the equipment in these mobile centers to help patch radio channels together so everybody can talk to each other. But that's kind of the idea behind this, is getting everybody to talk to each other. Emergency Operations Center. So the Emergency Operations Center at CTEC is gorgeous. It's amazing. You go up there and it's literally like, I don't know, maybe 4 times the size of this room.
I remember this 5 desks. And then the side,
Yeah.
side off.
But they've got it arranged so that they have like a desk for EMS, a desk for fire department, and it's like maybe probably two or three desks for EMS, 2 or 3 for fire department, and they have somebody from like Salvation Army. I mean, anybody who could possibly be involved in a mass casualty type response for like, I don't know, flooding, tornado, anything that can come through the city. They have a designated location. So when they do drills, they actually bring people up, and there's somebody at every single one of these desks, and they've got a computer and a phone at all of these desks, and they have like huge projector screens so they can put like the different media outlets that the news channels on. It's pretty cool. The idea behind it is it's one big room where all of the leaders of organizations involved in a particular response can come together and be in the same room, talk to each other, and talk to their particular organizations at the same time. Does that make sense? You guys have an EOC? You have an area designated EOC? Yeah. Radio frequencies. Kilohertz is 1,000 or 10 to the third cycles per second. Megahertz 10 to the 6 cycles per second. Gigahertz 10 to the 9 cycles per second. This all has to do with like the frequency of the radio waves. So when you talk about sound frequencies or frequencies of waves, sound waves, if they're about, less, what is that, 1 million? 10,000. 1/10,000th of a hertz to 15 hertz, you can't hear it. About 15 hertz to 20 kilohertz, so it's a pretty big range, is what we can hear. If you get higher than that, you have the very high frequencies of VHF. Those VHF radios are still used to the north of here in some locations. And in some more outlying communities, I think even more locally.
Those are the ones that are good rural, right? Because they get blocked by.
Is it? Yeah, one's good in urban settings because it
UHF is urban and VHF is rural.
I'll get to the picture. Anyway, there's a VHF low band and a VHF high band, and then there's the UHF, which is 300,000 megahertz to 3,000 megahertz. 300 megahertz to 3,000 megahertz. There we go. VHF, they skip by bouncing off layers in the ionosphere. There's a picture. They're longer range, but they're unpredictable because of the skip. The UHF, it's more of a line of sight. They're less likely to be interfered with than the VHF. They can bounce off building in urban areas, and they are used in medical communications. Around here, we use the 800 megahertz range. That's the 800 radios. So here's a picture. Your UHF is kind of really more the line of sight. It's not going to go over buildings, over mountains, anything. The VHF, it's good for going straight up. It's good for going over, you can have some small geographical topography. You can have some topography, but not a whole lot. The high frequency, it's got a pretty broad range. It's going to be airplane communications and, what am I trying to say, space shuttle communications. We have a space shuttle anymore. This is your ionosphere, so it's kind of the outer part of the atmosphere. Your high, what was it? Was it UHF?
Pretty sure UHF is in urban areas.
Yeah. Where's my picture? Anyway, these are your high frequency waves. They travel further before they're being reflected. The lower frequency waves, they kind of bounce off the ionosphere, so they...
Which one is it? The red is VHF?
Yeah.
Yes, there it is. These are your lower frequency. Space shuttle. Yeah, UHF. So this is the VHF.
Well,
This
one
is
pink
UHF.
and one red, or is it
Yes,
both?
this one's pink. So the one that's got skip underneath it here, that's the pink one. That
Well,
what
that
did I just
is-
say? That's the UHF. That's the VHF. Sorry. VHF is lower frequency. UHF is higher frequency.
Because there it says very high, it goes through the
Yes.
atmosphere. So the UHF actually goes higher than that, right? UHF is the highest.
Doesn't make sense because it said UHF bounce off the ionosphere. See? Which is what that is, because it's bouncing off the
Yeah.
ionosphere. I don't like this picture. Suffice to say, locally we use the UHF at 800 frequency, and that's the important part.
For the test.
No, it's just part of the lesson plan, so I'm supposed to be able to talk to you guys about what we do locally.
Okay, UHF.
So how do we put information on wave? There's a picture that I found.
Hopefully it's better than the other one.
Which one is that? So, this is what your waveform looks like normally, right? So if you hear like a pure sound wave,
Why doesn't it sound just travel straight?
what do you mean?
Why is it?
Because of vibration.
This is what this is vibration. So if you think about plugging a guitar string,
I am so not musically inclined.
No, no,
You
no.
just need to pull that guitar string, right? If you hit a guitar string,
pick a point on that guitar string, right?
it moves.
And just watch how it moves. It moves up and down when you pluck it, right?
Okay.
And this is basically, if you trace the displacement of the string over time, it moves like this.
Doing.
Yeah, this is
And
what the
then that should
string
get
does.
smaller and smaller and smaller as it dissipates to no more sound. Or at least
Right.
that we can't hear it.
Right. But we can also use like computers and electronics to generate these waves, and then we can modulate the waves, right? So we can change them. So modulate means you change them up in different ways. You can modulate it by changing the frequency, which is what happens here. See, it's like closer in this picture. The waves are closer together, so slightly higher frequency than here. Or you can modify the amplitude, and the amplitude is just how far up or down it moves. And you can see it's smaller and bigger. So you see the difference between these three, right? You see the picture, just in the picture you see the difference. Yes?
Yeah, I don't understand how
I
it all
understand
works,
what
but I see the
it's
difference.
trying
Yes.
to.
Right, so how it all works is a lot more complicated.
No, FM seems like it's usually a better signal than AM.
I know, it is. It does.
And they're different
seem like
numbers. Like AMs are like 4-digit numbers.
that. 3 to 4 digit
And it's
numbers.
usually like talk radio.
Mm-hmm.
They got this
Tell
one
the
station
quality
they sell
sounds
stuff
good.
on the AM channel.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of more
They
muffled
give her
and
like cars
nice.
at cheap prices.
And that's just a function of that
Yeah.
the frequency modulation gives you a more clear sound than the amplitude modulation. That's what FM and AM stand for. How do you get there? And then basically you can use this to encrypt data. If you think about data as being a bunch of ones and zeros, ultimately that's all it is.
Like the Matrix.
It's all ones and zeros. You can see how this could be like a 1 and this could be a 0 and this could be a 1. It's all how it's encoded. And I can't get into too much more detail than that. Other than it is possible to send information along waves. And this is how it's done. By changing things. So,
Somebody really, really smart figured this out.
Somebody took the can and the string to the whole new level.
that's very true. So I showed you the picture in the AM amplitude modulation. The actual type of the wave is modified or varied. It is used by some commercial broadcast stations, but it's easily interfered with. If you had like a line of sight with the broadcast tower, your sound quality would be better. He was saying earlier the AM stations are kind of fuzzy, it's hard to hear. They're more easily interfered with.
Who interferes with them?
It's the sun,
The wind.
the wind, buildings.
Mountains.
Environmental issues. It's not somebody.
No, it's not somebody actually doing it.
Some
And
kind of
it could
physical
be other.
obstacle in the way of wherever it's broadcasted from to your location, right?
Some
So
of the
is
waves.
the are these waves, AM waves, not as strong? Like that they're a wind.
Strength is a whole different thing.
Looks like they're not as consistent. In a way.
Then why even have it if it's easily interfered with?
Because it's easy to produce.
It's cheaper.
And it's just easy. AM was the first method of broadcasting. It's the first. Yeah, it was the first one out there because it's the easiest one to discover, and it still exists because people still have AM transmitters and AM receivers.
So what megahertz is AM?
It's very low.
It's
Very low. Like you gotta have a tower like near your house to be able to hear it.
well, and that's a matter of power, which is
Yeah.
watts.
Yeah.
And so as far as which megahertz it is, that goes back to, I mean, it's very similar to the FM stations. It's just a different modulation. It can't obviously be the same frequency, but it's very similar to that.
And I still get a lot of AM up in my car, for example. I still get a lot of AM stations. Just so you can tell the sound quality, it's not just clear and crisp. But it's there. That's why I talk radio versus music.
Yep.
Music wouldn't be as good on AM.
Exactly. Okay, FM. So I showed you the picture again for that. The frequency or the spacing of the carrier wave is varied, so it's just a change in the frequency, a change in how often the peaks occur. It does reduce noise and interference. I really have no idea how, but it's just a better quality. So biotelemetry. This is kind of our use of radio waves in medicine. So EKG signals from the patient in the field to a patient care facility. This is also used in the hospitals. So patients are given those like heart monitors to wear, and then there are little like antennas in the hallways that actually receive the signals those are putting out, so they can actually get up and go to the bathroom without being connected to a monitor. They still just wear it's a little box that they'll tuck like in a pocket in the hospital gown, and they can basically have constant monitoring of their vitals and their EKG through this little box rather than being attached to a screen. It says from a patient in the field to a patient care facility, it's a lot harder than it seems to make that happen. Because you have to think about it, to use radio waves to broadcast an EKG, it should be encrypted because you're probably sending patient data with it. If it's not encrypted, it means that somebody else who has a receiver for EKGs could theoretically pick up the EKG in the patient's name. It's not really, we don't really use the radio waves to send EKGs. We use
So
something
AM
like
and FM are not encrypted?
No. No, encrypted means it's locked up. You can't get it. It's not free and open to the public. Currently, all the radio frequencies in Williamson County for fire, EMS, and police are all encrypted, which means that somebody who just has a random scanner and wants to listen can't just go and turn on the Williamson County EMS channel. That'll change in a few more years. But
How do those come? Because we go on structure fire. I mean, it seems like 5 minutes after we're there, there's all these different people competing for, the companies that do disaster relief, and they're already there. Like, I think they have some kind of radio where they can listen in. They know it. Sometimes
it's
they're like
probably more likely than
simultaneously.
a PIO release or anything, because I literally just got off the phone with my husband. He does a lot of the radio stuff in the county. He said right now everybody's encrypted. So I'm basing it off of what he said.
Somebody got some
But that's a good
backdoor
point.
radio.
Yeah, somebody's got some information.
There's sometimes it's like almost simultaneous. These guys are there.
Well, there's an app on the phones. I mean, that you can, and that they have like certain places where they send it, and it's like internet based or whatever, where they send it, and it kind of sounds like a scanner in a way, but you're listening to everything that goes on around the house. I mean, that could be what it is. That people are pretty much goosenecking and sending them out like that.
Something. I don't know.
There's always a way around something.
Oh yeah.
Heck, my wife found out about a fire at the flea market in Belton before we even did it.
Nice.
And we were
Nice. So, yeah. As far as biotelemetry, the causes of getting poorer signals for as far as the EKG is concerned, patient movement or muscle tremors, any kind of loose electrodes. Obviously, if you have a poor connection with what's generating the EKG, which is your skin, your heart, your body, you're not going to get a good signal. So loose electrodes. The 60 Hertz AC sources. So if you have a machine that's not, what's the word? So 60 Hertz AC, that's the outlet power, is an alternating current. It can actually generate interference. And some monitors can pick that up. Like if your patient's holding on to a hospital bed that has metal bars, there's potential that there can be interference from something like that. Don't understand it all, but I've seen it. It exists. Somebody's near some sort of electrical machine.
Wait, are you saying that the alternating current from an outlet is 60 hertz?
Mm-hmm.
How does an outlet have a radio frequency?
It's not a radio frequency, so that actually has to do with do what?
It's a vibration. It's with a hertz measurement, right?
Yeah.
The speed of vibration.
Vibration. A hertz is just a frequency, a measure of frequency.
So the higher the frequency, I think the quicker the vibration. Like the graph you showed, I think like the higher the frequency, they're going to be really close together.
Mm-hmm.
Lower,
Yes.
like that makes sense because the lower. No, I guess you're not music inclined, but the lower, longer it is, the bigger waves. Of, like if you had a real thick bass string, real low. If you have a real high, skinny, it's going to be really high pitched. Smaller and faster, it's moving higher.
I guess we're supposed to have an outlet.
Shorter the length. Maybe the
So-
electricity generating through those wires is creating vibration.
You know that a microwave, when it heats your food up, is working off radio frequency waves. It's not heat.
Yeah, it's
The
microwave.
gen- the
That's
generating
microwaves.
because of their
It's
speed
just
of
the
the wave.
vibration of the
friction of the waves running together, right?
Yep.
It's generated,
It's
but
the-
it's not like actual heat that heats your food up.
Vibrations?
Vibrations, it vibrates the water molecules.
Yeah.
So,
Very
yes,
high for quick.
alternating current means basically it switches poles positive to negative 60 times a second. Another one of those things that is not entirely within my realm of comprehension why we have that. Something to do with power plants and generating current. But you can end up with, because you have the electricity switching back and forth 60 times a second, it can cause interference that shows up when you're in EKG. That's all I got.
It makes sense. The movement of the vibrations back and forth is going to cause. There's obviously something moving. It's not just stagnant.
Yeah.
So that would be hard.
As far as using radio frequencies, we have simplex, we have duplex, we have multiplex, we have trunked radio systems, and then I'm going to talk about digital communications. So this one I like. This one makes sense to me. Simplex. Do you guys know those little radios that you can buy to like go out and hunt? I don't know. My dad got someone for hunting. They're little, and I've got some in the back.
Walkie-talkie.
Yeah, they're really walkie-talkies. One person talks, and then the other person talks back. It's on one frequency, and they use the same frequency to both send the message for one way and send a message the other way, to receive and to send. It's the same frequency. Just as simple, it makes sense to me. One frequency, send, receive.
A good example of that would be like a remote control car too. It works off one frequency.
Think about
You can switch.
so a frequency. Think about like the radio stations in your car. Bob FM is 103.5. That's like a frequency.
I understand like that it is, but I don't understand how it is.
Okay, so this is one frequency. By frequency, no. What's another radio station? I've got satellite.
93.7. No, KBLJ.
KLJ is better.
The Rock.
More or less.
So is that the actual transmission being like transmitted, or is that the frequency?
So when you tune your radio into Bob FM, your radio looks for a wave that looks like this. When you tune your radio to 93.7, it looks for a wave that looks like this.
It knows to look for a wave?
Yes. And it's all based on the fact that it broadcasts a particular frequency. It knows what frequency it is, because frequency is something that's defined. When you say the frequency is 300 megahertz, you can tune a radio to 300 megahertz, and whatever's being broadcast over the 300 megahertz frequency will be picked up on your radio.
They must
So
be.
what megahertz is it?
I don't.
They must be the numbers that correspond with the FM numbers. They must be closely related. Like
They are.
the low, like the 80s, maybe say a higher or lower frequency, all the way up to 107.9 is high. Because if you're like at 103.3, it'll be a little bit staticky, but you'll still be hearing.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Or 103.1, it'll be low. So it must be incrementally
It is.
hertz. That makes
The
sense.
numbers are pertinent to the frequency.
Okay, that makes sense.
I can't remember the exact, but your radio knows to look for that, and it's called the carrier frequency. Because remember, when you have an FM, to actually get the sound across and know what they're saying on one end, so the guy's sitting in the radio talking, right? And it's transmitted over this frequency. It actually modifies the frequency when he talks. And that's how you get the sound out of your radio.
So is that frequency the actual message, or is it actually?
So the message is encoded based on, it would be like, it knows to look for this frequency, but then it's modified slightly, so you'd have like maybe a longer period, and then so it's not exactly this. This is just the carrier frequency. That doesn't really look very good. I'm not very good at drawing pictures on boards. But no, it's called the carrier frequency. That's what you tune your radio to. And then you modulate the frequency either by amplitude or by frequency. You modulate the AM, remember the AM versus the FM?
Mm-hmm.
You modulate one of the two, like in that little picture, and the way it's modulated determines what comes over your radio. Moving on. Simplex, easy, walkie-talkies. One person talks at a time. Duplex. So the radios receive and transmit on different frequencies. Both parties can talk at the same time. The transmitting frequency can carry one type of information at a time, and there are usually two frequencies that are paired up to create a channel. The important thing about this is that you send and receive on two different frequencies. Multiplex gets more confusing. So you have one frequency that can carry two signals, and you have another frequency that carries a different type of signal. For example, you can send voice and an EKG over your radio at one time. and then you receive on the other channel. It's expensive, and there's some loss of quality of those signals. The systems around here are duplex systems, as far as I know.
Or the digital.
They're digital.
Is duplex digital?
Yes.
How is you always hear digital and analog?
So digital is just translating things into ones and zeros versus having a full picture data wave thing. It would basically be like saying that this is 1 and this is 0, and completely getting rid of this part of data where it goes from 1 to 0. Does that make sense?
No.
Well, one fires your pacemaker up and the other one doesn't.
So if I were to take this wave, and this is an analog wave. So analog is a full spectrum of data. If this were a graph, for example, and this was like time, and this was like, I don't know, number of something, or amount of something, I could say this is about 1 and this is about 0. And then like completely ignore the rest of this information, and I would get most of the information. And that's basically what digital does, is it takes this analog, which is a whole lot of information, and dumbs it down into ones and zeros. But it flies across the air better, so you can get better
Perception.
perception. Ultimately not important. Really. So trunking. The systems that we have around here are trunked. And this actually helps us use fewer frequencies. So if you think about it, in Williamson County, we have Williamson County EMS, we have Leander Fire, Cedar Park Fire, Round Rock, Georgetown, Granger, Weir, Gerald, Bartlett,
Liberty Hill.
Liberty Hill. Who's the other one that sits just north of Austin? Sandbass.
And that's Florence.
Florence. Right. So if everybody had to have like 10 different frequencies for their own, seriously, everybody had to have like 10 different frequencies. That's a lot of frequencies.
When you say frequencies, do you mean channels? Or
Basically channels, yes. Right. So I use frequencies because I'm about to use channels in a different way. So imagine if you had to have a frequency for every channel, right? Round Rock Fire needs to have 20 different channels. So they have to have 20 different frequencies. Now, Leander has 20 different channels and need 20 different frequencies. EMS has 10 different channels and need 10 different frequencies. The problem is, the FCC assigns frequencies, and like there's only so many frequencies to go around in the entire world, the United States, to broadcast on. So to limit the number of frequencies and make it cheaper and more efficient, they do this thing called trunking, which is basically, there's a big old computer somewhere in Williamson County that says we're going to use 10 total frequencies for the entire county, because how many channels are we actually talking about at once in the entire county? Round Rock's not talking about all 20 of their channels at once. Leander's not talking about 20 of their channels at once, right? So it basically says, I'm going to tune to a channel, and then I'm going to assign that channel to a particular frequency while it's being used. So when I transmit, I say, okay, I'm on scene, that'll go on one frequency. And then the next transmission may go on a completely different frequency.
But you're on the same channel.
But you're on the same channel. So frequencies are not necessarily assigned to channels. There's some computer that figures out how to do all this.
That's probably when you key up, you actually get.
That's because you're hitting a repeater.
Oh.
Everybody look totally lost.
It's just, I guess, this doesn't compute.
I'm there with you. It has taken me years to try and figure this out. I have taught radio communications in EMT class like 4 or 5 times, and every time it's been like, okay, I learned like a couple new things, but it's still not the thing that I can teach best. So yeah, whatever frequency happens to be available is what the message is transmitted over. And
the computer finds that frequency?
yep, it's pretty cool. Conceptually, it's kind of cool that we can do that. I mentioned that these trunk systems can be encrypted. I put up here, so I guess it's been a few years now that Williamson County went to kind of the standardized, everybody's on the same radio system. And when they did that, the sheriff's office basically said we want it all encrypted. And they paid for the encryption fees. I guess there are fees associated with the encryption keys and all this sort of stuff. And those encryption keys are good for 5 years. After that, they become available to the public. So it becomes public domain. You can continue to encrypt your radios if you want, but you have to pay more money to get a new encryption key.
How do you with an encryption key?
An encryption key is like if you take...
Pretty much hiding your radio channel.
Yeah.
No, nobody can find it.
Yeah, it's like taking in... I'm trying to think of the easy way to do this. Easy way to explain encryption. It's like if I gave you a number and said, I'm going to give you a series of numbers. And the series of numbers are significant to something, but I don't want anybody else to know it, so I'm going to give you a secret encryption key, which is like number 23. And I'm going to multiply this whole list of numbers by 23, and then that's the list of numbers I'm going to give you. But you have to know to divide every number by 23 to get back to the original list.
So the ones and zeros then make sense?
Kind of. Yeah. But you have to know and it's way more complicated than that. I mean, there's a whole set of stuff that goes into it. But the basics of encryption are that. So as far as digital communications, the computers take and translate these voice signals, which are these normal waves, into a bunch of ones and zeros. It condenses the messages, it eases the frequency overcrowding because, like I said, you're only transmitting the ones and zeros rather than all of this information in between. It says it prevents unauthorized monitoring, which you can do with the encryption, and it allows the use of mobile data terminals because they're all digital, they're all computers, and computers are based on ones and zeros. Questions? So system components, I'm going to talk about base stations, mobile transmitters, receivers, portable transmitters, receivers, repeaters. I'm going to skip satellite receivers and add satellite, repeaters. Talk about remote consoles, encoders, decoders, and some alternative and emerging technologies. Have you guys looked at that slide yet?
No.
If you skip ahead and look, it dates the presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, a base station. This is like the radio that sits in the dispatch center, or a radio that sits at a station, or a radio that sits at a hospital. It's one that's designed to stay in place. It's not going to move around anywhere. It says the geography and the terrain influence the installation. You're going to put the antenna up on the highest elevation possible because that's going to be the best distance.
Are you supposed to put it at?
Oh, well, for this, it should be perpendicular to the Earth.
So
90 degrees. You should have it standing straight up and down.
Why was that important enough to be a test question?
Oh, as far as on the other one, that has to do with the portable radio. If you hold it sideways, it doesn't transmit as well if you hold it upright. So your base station, this is your power thing. We talked about power, 45 to 275 watts. That'll kind of determine how far your wave's going to travel impact. So multi-channel bases can receive on all channels simultaneously, but transmit only on one channel at a time. But most bases now have the multi-channel simulcast, so you push a button and it can transmit on all the channels. So for example, if somebody's got an open mic, well, that's not actually the best example. If you're doing like an all-call, or you need to transmit to, if you're doing like a weather report to all of the fire stations in Williamson County, they do that sometimes.
Like a mass text.
Yeah, it's like sending a text message to lots of people. They push down one button and it transmits to all of the stations, or all of the channels at the same time. So your mobile transmitter and receiver, these are mounted in vehicles, but the vehicles move around, so they're mobile. They output about 20 to 50 watts, and their range is about 10 to 12 miles over average terrain, which means they have to be within 10 to 12 miles of a base station or a repeater to be able to communicate. Range decreases in mountainous areas and areas with large buildings, and it increases on water or in very flat terrain.
Bounce off.
Right. Yeah, it's just got a straight shot, kind of a line of sight. And then the portable transmitter and receivers. The portables, as opposed to the mobiles, the portables are handheld. These are the ones that you carry on your belt or in your hand on your belt. They're used outside of the vehicle. They're not really called walkie-talkies. They're portable radios. You don't call them walkie-talkies anymore. They have a low output power, only 1 to 5 watts in a limited range. All of the ones around here are multi-channel. They're not a single channel. I can't even think of a single channel radio other than the ones you can buy at Academy for hunting. And even those have like multiple channels you can switch to. They may be designed to retransmit or repeat through mobile units to increase range. I don't know of any around here that do that. Yeah, can't think of any. The signal quality is best when the antenna is kept perpendicular to the plane of the earth. That just means when you hold it up and you're trying to be all cool and hold your radio sideways and talk through it, it doesn't transmit as well, so hold your antenna sticking straight up.
We don't talk to them.
Kind of.
We talk to them.
But your radio
When
is
it's on
shooting
our-
straight
when it's
up.
on our belt, it's pointing.
Straight up.
Pointing
As long
straight
as
up.
we're not like laying down. So I don't know why I never did that.
You
Okay,
have the
resting.
radio.
Unless we were like collapsed or something.
Yeah.
Collapsed on us.
Questions about that? So repeaters. When you send out a radio signal, if it doesn't have enough power to get where it needs to go, but if it hits, then hopefully it hits the repeater. So the mobile radios, remember I said had really low power. It was like 1 to 5 watts, right? So it's not very much power. So you need this repeater thing. The repeater basically listens for the radio and then repeats out what the radio said at a higher power so that it gains range. There are several repeaters throughout Williamson County.
So they're actual locations?
They're actually, they look like antennas.
Okay.
And they
really
basically-
tall,
yeah.
with the red line on top so the helicopters don't hit them?
I don't know if they're
Those
that
cell
tall.
phone towers.
I don't know if they're that tall, but yeah. They're antennas.
How does it know where to repeat it? Like, if it senses the message, how does it know to send it that way or
It just
that
sends it
that
out.
way?
It sends it out every direction.
Because that other radio on the other side is listening for that freak that comes through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not sending it to any particular radio. That radio is on the other side is just listening for it.
Well, so what if you're on the far edge of the city, like far south or far whatever, and a repeater sends the message? So what's preventing from another city from picking up that transmission?
They got to be on the right channel.
You can only go so far, too.
Yeah. I
They
guess-
can. I can hear Round Rock Fire and Leander. I just have to turn to the right channel.
How far, I mean, those repeaters, obviously there's a point where it doesn't, you're too far away or you can't hear it anymore.
Yeah, it depends. I had one of the Williamson County radios. My husband was on a big structure fire, and I had to go to work. I was like, oh my God. And so I listened, and I went around 360 to get to South Austin, and I heard the Williamson County channels almost all the way down into South Austin.
You listen to the call?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a tippy toe?
No, my husband,
Her husband
was on fire. I
She was interested.
I was interested.
I can see that.
Interested or worried?
Both. This was when he was still a lieutenant, not a chief yet, and so he actually still went into fires, and so I
I
cared.
can see that. I'd be interested in listening to a call. I've sat at the MCT before and listened to calls
Really?
for a while.
So yeah, it depends, and that, you know, it was a nice clear day. There were no clouds. I didn't have to worry about any of that, and I was up on 360 where there's a higher elevation.
Right, you were
so
going
then I
up on
had
a peak, yeah. Wow.
So it all depends.
How did you have a radio?
There may be an extra radio at my house. No, my husband has an assigned radio that he usually just leaves at home, and I had it with
Have
him.
a charger and you're just...
Bother me.
Okay.
Mobile repeaters. So I put this slide in. It's not in your thing.
Yes.
So I kind of mentioned these things, mobile repeaters. They're in the communication bands. So you can see in the picture these repeaters, right? So I mentioned that they're like an antenna. Well, you can also have a mobile repeater that's attached to the communication bands. This is kind of cool because it allows you to basically move your repeater around. Ultimately, you can have a series of repeaters as long as you know all the codes and stuff. There's a lot more detail. But these mobile repeaters make it possible for deployments so that when our units are deployed out of Williamson County to, say, Galveston, they're able to actually talk back to Williamson County dispatch on the radio.
So these big mobile commands, like that
Mhm.
band you showed,
Mhm.
will that have a repeater on it?
Generally speaking, that would be where you would find them. I'm pretty sure the one in Williamson County does, and I think the one in Austin does. But it's not a guarantee that if you have a communication van, you'll have a mobile repeater. It's a newer technology.
$250,000.
You added this slide, didn't you?
It did.
So I don't know.
And I skipped the satellite repeaters because nobody knew what it was.
Satellite
receivers, because the only thing I could get when I Googled satellite radio receivers was XM radio. And that's not what we're talking about.
So who wrote this presentation?
Judging by the pictures.
I forgot to know.
Well, and here's the thing. I looked at the lesson plan, which is all of the stuff, and it talks, I mean, it literally talks about, like, let's talk about facsimile transmission. Faxes as new technology. So the educational standards are a little out of date. That's why I'm trying to bring in some of the local stuff, because that's the other thing that I'm supposed to teach about is local stuff. So, remote consoles. Yeah. This is another one of those old technologies that doesn't really, it's not really used around here anymore. The concept, I guess, is that, let's end with the satellite receivers, is that you could have a receiver or a console that is somewhere far away from the base station, but is somehow hardwired into that base station, or through by either telephone lines or microwaves or radio waves that actually can transmit.
It seems like it'd be like the satellite phones, except for radio, isn't it? Goes up to the satellite. And
But it's not the satellite. The term satellite in that has nothing to do with satellite up in the air. It's a satellite meaning like a location.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we have repeaters now that basically obsolete this technology.
They probably don't exist no more. That's like a funny thing.
That's the thing. I mean, I was looking. I spent like 30 minutes looking this stuff up, and was like, I'm wasting time here. So then there's this concept of encoders and decoders. This kind of goes with the trunking. It allows you the maximum use of a small number of frequencies. It's not really encoding, but it's kind of like, it says this there, it's like a combination lock. Encrypting. It is like encoding, it's an encoder. So you can buy these like scanners, right, that let you listen in. And the scanners basically let you kind of scan across the frequencies. When you have an encoder or a decoder, you basically have to, it's kind of like encryption in a way, because you have to be able to put in this code, this combination lock, to be able to listen to what is being said on these channels. You can't just kind of dial through them like you can on your TV. It'd be like the parental control. When you got to put a parental control in to get to actually access what's on the channel. You guys use parental controls? Not yet. You have to put a code in to access the channel. So you can turn to the channel, but it says parental code required. It's kind of like what that is.
Oh, man,
This is my favorite slide. Emerging technologies. Cellular telephones apparently are an emerging technology. Facsimile transmission apparently also is an emerging technology, as is computer charting. Video and audio transmission from an ambulance. So this one actually is not as common around here, but in rural parts of Texas and actually in Korea. In Korea, every ambulance has a video monitor installed, like a camera and then a video screen installed, and all of their ambulance personnel basically talk to the hospital to get any sort of orders. So it's all done by video. They're really technicians.
Scott and Lyons Temple has them in the back of their room. They have the video camera, and I was like, "Oh, what? They don't trust you or something?" They're like, "No." So the doctor can see what's going on in the back of the ambulance.
Really?
And he can tell you what's
Interesting.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all up in the ambulance.
Automatic vehicle locators, AVL. Definitely used in Austin. I don't know if it's used up here yet.
Yeah.
So I think they're starting to
Last
use
2
it.
months we've been using it. So like we down.
Low jack or something, or
Yep. Do what?
so like low jack or something.
GPS.
Oh.
It's basically using GPS on the vehicles, but they call it AVL, automatic vehicle locator. And then, of course, GPS and the geographic imaging system technologies. Let's take a break. Y'all need a break? It's been an hour.
Yep.
Do this.
Oklahoma, yeah.
So this is the part where I teach you guys how to talk on the radio. Some of you guys already know how to do this. The important parts to pay attention to here are radio reports, talking to the hospital and actually giving a radio report. We'll practice doing that at the end of class today. And whenever we're doing scenarios, I'll have you practice giving radio reports because it's a skill that takes some practice to master. If you think about it, you only get about 30 seconds of time to give your report because that's how long a nurse's attention span is. Because it's usually a nurse on the other side of the radio taking the report. He's choking. He thinks that's funny. But it's true. You basically have 30 seconds because after that they're like, oh my God, are they still talking? What are they saying? It doesn't matter. So you have to basically concisely and very quickly give a report to let the hospital know what you're bringing in. But you have to know how to actually talk on the radio. So know what you're going to say before you get on the radio. I'm sure you guys have all heard somebody who's just rambled and rambled and rambled because they didn't think about what they were going to say. So think about what you're going to say before you start talking and don't waste airtime. Never transmit, never just turn to a channel and then hit the button. I'm actually apparently guilty of this. Whenever we clear the hospital in Austin, you have to go back to control and say medic 14 clear hospital, whatever hospital we're at. But I would just turn the radio channel and just immediately key up and usually walked on top of somebody. But you should actually stop and listen and make sure nobody else is talking on the radio and having an important conversation that you're interrupting with traffic that's not as important. Wait at least 1 second after keying up the microphone before talking. Really what you're waiting for on the new radios, the 800 radios, they kind of beep. They make it's a noise. You hit the button and it makes a noise. And what that means is that you've hit the repeater. It means that the radio has connected with the repeater and is ready to send the signal wherever it's going, back to the base station.
Yeah, one movie.
Yeah, so you don't cut yourself off. It takes a second or so to hit the repeater so that you can actually communicate your whole message rather than just part of it. Identify yourself on every transmission. This is important. The digital radios modulate people's voices. So you have a distinct radio voice that is very different from your own voice. And it can take different voices and make them sound very much the same. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So all of our radio voices in here could sound very similar. Speak at close range, about 2 to 3 inches directly into the microphone. Don't yell, use normal conversational tone and speed. Articulate clearly. Avoid words or phrases which are easily misunderstood. Avoid letting your voice trail off at the end of a sentence. So your message is actually heard all the way through.
That means pulling the microphone away from your mouth to let go of the button while you're still talking?
No, that'd be just kind of going like that.
No.
Roger.
Yeah. Use proper English. We don't use codes or anything like that. No 10 codes. We don't say Roger over and out.
That's so fun.
I know, it kind of is. People doing meaning. Meow. What movie is that from? Super Troopers?
Meow.
Oh, yeah.
Meow.
I'm sorry to think about that.
Be courteous, but remember, please and thank you is understood. Even though it is, I would always say thank you because the dispatchers sometimes will get snappy. Snippy, whatever. They get angry. And so you say thank you and then they feel better about themselves. Don't show emotion. There are plenty of people who show emotion on the radio, especially when things start to hit the fan. Don't curse. This is actually FCC regulated. So if it's a word that you can't say on TV, then it's a word you can't say over the radio. All radio frequencies are monitored by the FCC, and the FCC is family friendly. We don't have a PG-13 rating over our radios, so we have to transmit at a family friendly level.
So is it G-rated?
It is G-rated. But don't curse on the radio.
So you can get fined, or
yes, actually, you can get fined. You can get fined.
No.
Don't vocalize pauses. Don't vocalize pauses. Don't do that. Don't unkey your microphone until you finish talking. This is great. We had the push to talk buttons actually on the console, so I could do a radio report through the headset while I was driving. Drive with one hand, push the button to talk. And if we hit a bump, sometimes my hand would come up off the microphone. So coming around 2222, trying to give a radio report, and the ambulance was like all sorts of keying and unkeying.
Do you ever establish command when you get scenes?
On particular call types in EMS, we did. The fire department always takes command. Because there's, can do that, I guess. But yeah, any major incidents we'd establish an EMS command. Anytime we would have basically multiple patients, we're going to have multiple resources coming in, somebody just command.
It's always fun to think of creative things to say for establishing a command.
It was supposed to be, so we had a defined set. It was the street name.
We had one call where there was this lady coming out of the nursing home. She had escaped, and she was wearing a turquoise jacket, and she was going down the street. And lieutenant at the time, he said, "This is NG2. We're establishing turquoise jacket command." That was awesome.
Yeah, command. When you establish command, it's usually the street name. That's the convention I've heard, whatever street you're on. Okay, so patient radio reports. This is important. You communicate information to the receiving facility. The idea is that the hospital should be prepared to take over your patient. On your less critical patients, it's kind of less important. You give a quick, synopsis. They'll figure out if they have a room available or not, if they're going to triage or kind of what area to put them in. But for your critical patients, it's really important. If you have a patient who's intubated, that you've intubated in the field, or a semi-patient, they're going to call resources and bring them into the emergency room as appropriate. So if you have a patient who's going to need a respiratory therapist as soon as you get there, you need to make that clear. You need to make clear that they have a respiratory problem. Now, ultimately, it's not up to you to determine if they're going to get a respiratory therapist as soon as they get there or not. But if you tell them over the air or the radio that you've intubated, they're going to have a respiratory therapist there. They're going to have an emergency doctor available right there. If you have a stroke patient, they're going to clear out the CT scanner and make that available for you. So it's important, especially in critical patients, to relay the information in a way that lets the hospital know exactly what they need to have ready. It should be brief as you can. Like I said, nurse's attention span, 30 seconds. Pertinent, descriptive of the patient's status, and confidential. What does that mean?
Don't say names.
No names. No names. Have all the information you need to report available before you start talking. This is particularly pertinent, like in Dell Children's. They actually take notes on the vital signs that are given to them over the radio, and then some sort of tracking system. I don't know what it is, but they always wanted a full set of vital signs over the radio. Most of the other hospitals could care less what the vital signs are, unless it's significantly pertinent to the call. But Dell Children's want all the vital signs. I can't tell you the number of times I forgot halfway through my report that I didn't have a full set of vital signs on the kid before I was calling, and I had to stop and ask my partner for a set of vital signs. It's really not cool. So make sure you have all the information you need before you start talking on the radio. Report the status of the ABC's chief complaint and the vital signs early. So some people tell you to call the hospital as soon as you know you're going there. Other people tell you to wait till you're about 5 or 10 minutes out. Ultimately, what really matters is if the hospital is notified. If you have something that's going to, early notifications better, like a STEMI patient or a stroke patient, something where it's going to take them time to get resources, then the sooner the better. If you have a patient with a subtoe, 5 minutes is plenty of notice. You can wait till you're closer. If you call in a subtoe and tell them that you're 40 minutes out, they're going to forget about it by the time you get there. Oh yeah, you did call in. Yeah, we don't have a bed. Don't diagnose, just describe the patient's problem. Use standard medical terminology, and if you don't know the word, use plain English. His leg is all red and puffy and swollen, as opposed to he has cellulitis in his legs. Repeat all orders. So if you call to get physician orders, make sure you repeat back exactly what you heard, because sometimes between the fuzziness of the phone call and an accent or whatever else may happen, background noise, it is very easy to make a mistake in what you think you heard. There's a discrepancy between what the doc said and what you heard. If you have the opportunity to transmit continuous telemetry, then don't do it because it gets annoying. It prints out rolls and rolls of paper at the hospital. Avoid ongoing transmissions. So the radios that we have around here beep at you when you've been talking for a minute. If you get that beep, you've been talking too long, unless you have a truly critical patient and you need to get that information to them. So if you get that beep, then stop talking and make sure that they're still copying the information. Make sure they're still listening. And paint a picture, a brief picture, but a picture nonetheless of the patient for the receiving hospital. Use a standard format. I think we talk about one in particular here. But if you don't use a standard format, all essential information is not provided, time is wasted, patient care is delayed, people get frustrated, and you end up showing up and the nurse is like, yeah, I didn't really understand what you were saying in your report. What did you bring me? It's like, oh. So giving a patient report. The 5 Ps, personnel, who are you? Medic 23. The patient, a 43-year-old female. The problem, chief complaint, chest pain. Protocol treatment, treated with aspirin and nitrates. And proceeding to, meanings here, we'll talk about it. So yeah, however you identify yourself. Where I was, it was just your unit number, Medic 23. Some places may want, your personnel, name, number, whatever it is, but that's going to be system specific. Patient, age, gender, and weight. When is weight important?
When they're really needed. When they're going to need additional stuff.
The one time that they actually consistently asked for weight was when the patient was going to the cath lab. Because they actually did some weight. They basically would pull up drugs and have drugs ready based on weight. Yeah. So when the patient went to the cath lab, they always wanted an approximate weight of the patient. I think they set something with the table too. I think they have to set parameters so they try and get everything ready.
Do you ask the patient if you can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Ask the patient if you can. And the problem, the chief complaint and vital signs, if your system has you actually report a full set of vital signs. In Austin, they tried to get us to do that, but ultimately the number of patients I ran where vital signs were normal, we just said vital signs stable. Their complaint is not specific to vital signs. If they had any vital signs out of the ordinary, then you should absolutely report that. And then talk about the problem, mechanism of injury, any major injuries, trauma modifiers that are present, vital signs, Glasgow score, revised trauma score. So there's a lot of different ways to score trauma.
What's a trauma modifier?
Yeah, I don't know. Like if it's so we had like a trauma activation, which is basically the CDC has set guidelines for basically who should go to a trauma facility. So if they meet one of those categories, that would be what they're referring to there. So the trauma score, that's what I was trying to say. There are a couple different published ways to score trauma. I don't know anybody who does it in the field. It's one of those things that's like, there are things that we can't do. These scores are based on like x-rays, CT scan, that sort of stuff. And the trauma score basically is used for mortality outcome. It's a research thing. It's not something that we really do around here. I'm sure some places do. We don't. Protocol treatments, so these are going to be the treatments that you gave. Aspirin, nitrates for chest pain, IV fluids, whatever you did. Proceeding to destination and ETA. Well, hopefully you're calling the hospital that you know that you're going to. And then, we'll be there in 5 minutes. With multiple patients, number each patient and complete your report for each patient separately. So patient number 1 is a 53-year-old female claiming chest pain. Patient number 2 is a 52-year-old male claiming short breath. But you complete the whole report before you move on to the next patient. Most serious to least serious. Your job is to communicate, not to show off. Talk about how, just communicate. Tell them what they need to have ready for you. Do you have a question?
We also have to go ahead and come in emerging or non-emerging.
Yeah, I usually do that at the beginning. They can usually tell with the sirens in the background and on. So, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, they do regulate all non-government communications. So that's everything from radio, TV, anything that's broadcast to emergency broadcast, airline broadcast, everything. They regulate all of it. They license and allocate the radio frequencies. They establish technical standards for radios.
They own the air.
They do. They own the air and everything that contributes to it. They monitor frequencies and they spot check base stations and dispatch centers. So the FCC does, in fact, occasionally show up at the base stations to check stuff out. Questions? We'll do some practice radio reports. We'll do our other lecture first. documentation. So this is something that it's kind of hard to teach because documentation varies from department to department. But we'll talk kind of about some general documentation stuff, and then we'll talk about how to document in the absence of any sort of form or computer program or anything like that. We'll talk about inherent writing and that sort of stuff. So, why do we document? Well, preserves basic patient information, their name, birthday, allergies, that sort of stuff, history. Records any changes in the patient condition, justifies what we did, allows for continuity of care so that the nurses and doctors know what it is that we did to our patient. Satisfies regulatory requirements. I think this is a real reason any of us have to document. That and billing. I think if we could avoid it, every single one of us would avoid documentation. It's not the most pleasant aspect of our jobs, but it is important. Very important. It also provides data for quality assurance and research. So a copy of the report must be left at the hospital with the patient at the receiving facility. The state law does require this. Somewhere in here it says before the ambulance goes back into service. I don't know if it's before the ambulance goes back into service anymore or if it's within 24 hours. I was taught within 24 hours. Now that we've gone to the electronic care stuff, it should be within 24 hours of dropping the patient off at the hospital.
Wouldn't you want to finish the report before you went back to service though?
Depends on whose perspective you're coming from. From my perspective as a field medic, absolutely. From the management's perspective, saying I have the ambulances out of service for 30 to 40 minutes after dropping the patient off. Not when there's calls dropping.
So how do you get a copy of the report left with the patient if you don't?
It's all electronic, right? Can you do it on your little laptop? And
Yeah, you can fax straight to the hospital or print it straight to the hospital printer. Yeah, so
So that state law is different now? It says a copy of the report must be left with the patient.
it still has to be left there. It still has
How
to
do
be
you
gotten to the
unless you
hospital.
finish it?
Well, you have 24 hours to get it there.
So
So
what
it's
if
not
you,
really left.
what if you started running, you ran like 16 calls in a shift and
Done it.
you had 16 reports you had to write?
Not 16, but I have had shifts, I think 5 was my record, where I had 5 incomplete reports that I had to finish at the end of my shift.
So how would you do it? You drop the patient off, you start writing a report right away.
Yeah.
You go in service?
Yeah, it depends on, where we were, we had 20 minutes at the hospital. If everything was done by 20 minutes, you're good.
Right.
If you had a critical call with an emergent return, you could get up to an additional 15 minutes, unless your truck was really nasty, and then you had to call your supervisor and get approval for additional time at the hospital. But after 20 minutes, you were available for calls automatically.
So you could still be writing a report
Yeah.
and you get popped another call and then you got to...
And usually that was enough time. That was right about the right amount of time. But, yeah, if you weren't done, you just have to go back and finish it
Can you
later.
do it on your laptop?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
That's when you become a really fast typer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was faster at type. When I started, we were still on paper. And I was always backlogged. I could
It's
never
horrible
finish
in
reports.
paper.
Typing, I'm way faster. Way faster. So this says patient care has not legally been transferred until the hospital has your written report. When you leave the patient at the hospital, yes, patient care has been transferred. The documentation is protection for us. It's protection. It's a reflection of our good patient care that we do, as long as we document what we do appropriately. It's an accurate, complete, legible medical record that implies accurate, complete, organized assessment and management. Now, if Dave were here right now, he'd be saying, complete? I would never say my report is complete. They taught us that in cop school. He actually emailed this to me. And I was like, yeah, that's actually kind of a good point. It's as complete as we can make it, but we don't document every single word that everybody says. We have to include everything that we did. We want to be as complete as possible.
It's impossible to be.
But it's impossible to be,
It's impossible.
for the purposes of somebody asking you while you're sitting on while you're in court, and somebody asking you, is your report complete? Well, why didn't you document that your patient said this? You don't document every little thing that your patient says. So-
I documented the important stuff.
Otherwise you'd be writing a novel.
Right, otherwise you'd be writing a novel. We don't have video recording.
Patient's left eye.
But it should document everything that you did and the important stuff that your patient said. Good medical record, accurate, complete, timely, legible. If you guys have issues with legibility, find a way to make it so that if you have to write a handwritten report, that it's legible. Free of alterations, free of extraneous information, professional. So you don't want to document facts. You don't document judgments. You don't document, like if you look at your patient and they look anxious, you don't document that they look anxious. You document what you see that tells you they look anxious. They're, tapping their fingers and they're breathing fast and they're staring off and they're talking very quickly. Those are actual facts, not judgments. Does that make sense?
That could be their own demeanor.
Could be, exactly. Don't speculate about the patient or incident. Double check numerical entries. Make sure they're legible. Recheck the spellings of people's names, locations, and medical terms. Work on spelling. Those of you spellers, poor spellers in the room.
Sorry.
You can't
You're
spell
looking
check
at
on
me
paper.
as you went around.
Look at everybody. Just work on spelling. Accurate. So if you make a mistake, even in your patient care, document it. You still have to document what you did. It's better to record your own mistakes than for someone else to uncover your mistakes. Include all requested information. So make sure you fill out all the check boxes. If you're not writing a straight up narrative report, and most places don't, make sure you fill out all the boxes. And if you don't know the information, write unknown or NA or whatever. At least 2 sets of vital signs on every patient. I've mentioned before, I haven't always had 2 sets of vital signs on every patient. But if you're transporting a patient to the hospital and you're with them for longer than 10 minutes, you should probably have 2 sets of vital signs. Failure to document implies failure to consider. If you didn't document, you didn't do it, you didn't think about it. If you look for something and it isn't there, then document its absence. Click your pertinent negatives. Or if you're looking for bruising, if someone says they were choked, that somebody grabbed them around their neck, but you looked and didn't see any bruising, then document that you didn't see any bruising. If it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. Legible. If you can't read the report, then you may be unable to determine what happened. You have to make it legible. Documents presented in court must speak for themselves. And if the document can't be deciphered, the jury can completely ignore it, which could be bad. Or it could be good.
Typing is good.
Do what?
That's why typing is good.
That is why typing is good. The report sloppy, that reflects on your care. Try and make it as neat as possible. Complete reports immediately after the call is finished. Timely completion implies accurate, complete information. This is state law requires a written report to be left at the hospital before the ambulance goes back in service. There's got to have been some change about that because they were very particular about making sure they followed the laws there in Austin. So I assume that it's changed to be within 24 hours instead of immediately. Free of alterations. So don't attempt to hide errors. If you made a mistake, cross it through with one line, initial it, and then correct it. If you discover it after you've submitted your final report, if you're like, oh crap, I forgot to document this medication that I gave them, write an addendum, date it, attach it to the original document, and then note the addendum on the original report. Free of extraneous information. Don't label your patients drunk. What do you say if you think they're drunk?
Slurred speech.
Yeah, slurring of speech, abnormal gait, odor of alcohol on or about patient. You could say that it's on their breath.
Eyes glossed over.
Do you ever say that they have alcohol in their breath? How do you know it's on their breath and not spilled on their clothes? Oh, they spilled a beer on themselves. That must have been what she said.
Smells like alcohol.
Yeah, odor of alcohol on or around patient, on or about patient. Yeah, smell of alcohol. Describe the observations you made. Preface the comments by the patient with per patient or patient states. Record hearsay only if applicable. Don't record hearsay as facts. So-and-so stated that somebody else said that this was true. Patient's boyfriend said that. Patient's girlfriend said that. He said that this earlier. Use quotation marks only if the statement is accurate word for word. Try and write it accurate. If you put it in quotation marks, it carries a lot of weight. Avoid interjecting humor. Although I've read a number of reports that contain humor, it is not professional and it is not appropriate. Write every report the way you would want it to sound if it were read on the national news or if it were published in the Washington Post. Don't submit something as a report that would embarrass you. The person who rode with the patient writes the report. All personnel should review the report. That didn't always happen. If you have a long report, don't hesitate to use additional pages for a number of times, especially on the calls that were not quite cardiac arrest calls, but were almost cardiac arrest calls. They got a really long report. Yeah. Avoid stating diagnostic impressions. Report facts and observations. If you must state a diagnostic impression, do so within your scope of training. For example, if, one of the check boxes on the electronic reports in Austin was primary impression, and that was basically what was our protocol that we were using. Was it an acute coronary syndrome patient? Was it an overdose patient, psych patient? And then include observations that led to the impression. Your documentation should support what you did for your patient. Avoid using possible or question mark when the observation would have been obvious to anyone. Make sure your treatment is recorded, match the mechanism of injury or the nature of illness, like I just said. Your documentation should support what you've done treatment-wise for your patient. If there's something that should have been done but that wasn't done, then talk about why. If in the standard of care you would have normally started an IV on the patient, but maybe the patient said, I don't want an IV because I have an access port up here. Then document I didn't start an IV because the patient refused because they have an access port, chemotherapy or something. Yes?
If it's in the protocol, if we didn't do it,
Statewide. Uh-huh.
That's not clear in my head.
Yeah. So plenty of reasons that, not to do something that's otherwise indicated, and most of them are completely legitimate. Just document why you didn't do it. And spaces are provided for documenting times, fill them in. Failing to document times implies lack of concern about the time factor. If you have a prolonged scene time, then explain why. If you put a monitor on the patient, include a rhythm strip or include a 12 lead. If a patient complains of pain in an area, state what you found when you examined the area. Because if they say my feet hurt and you didn't examine the area, it shows a lack of concern. As far as refusals, so we talked a lot about refusals at the beginning of the class. Do a thorough patient assessment as long as they allow it. The important things to document are the capacity of the patient to make an informed decision, present mental capacity. Explanation of possible consequences of refusing care, so make sure you explain that to them and you document what you explain to them. Other suggestions for accessing care. Go to the doctor's office, they can take their cells to the emergency room, they can call us back. Patient understanding of consequences of suggestions. Make sure that they indicate to you that they understand and document that they indicate to you that they understand. And EMS's willingness to return if the patient changes their mind. That's important. Make sure that they know that we'll come back if they change their mind. Questions? We'll do okay? I'm going to talk about some sort of call-specific things to document. Looking through this, it might help you think about pertinent negatives for particular call types as well, because these are kind of the things that I would expect to see in a particular type of document.
Any
So,
stuff more important for the test?
I'll look and let you know. As far as NVCs, so type of collision, head-on, rollover, T-bone, or lateral impact. The degree of damage to vehicles, minor scratches to both bumpers versus, 2 feet of intrusion to the passenger side. Location of the patients, use of seatbelts, deployment of airbags, anything else that may be pertinent. Are there any skid marks? Yeah.
Now, on the actual, if you say, let's just say if you did 2 feet of intrusion, would that be a good guesstimate, or would you bust out a tape measure?
Approximately. I always put approximately.
Okay.
Yeah, approximately 2 feet of intrusion.
That's sort of your give or take method.
Yeah, you're not going to bust off the tape measure.
I didn't think so.
No. If there's this, potential for death and the officers are doing an investigation, they may.
Yeah.
I don't know what all they investigate, but yeah. How about falls? So where the patient fell from? They fell off the roof. Fell off a second-story roof. How far they fell? The surface they fell onto. Fell off the roof into grass or on a concrete driveway. and why the patient fell. Tripping and falling is very different from passing out and falling. Head injuries, level of consciousness. An initial GCS would be good as well. Pupillary responses I would expect to see. And then the presence or absence of drainage from the nose, ears, any type of cervical pain or deformities, muscle spasms, tenderness, any paresthesias.
What's that?
Paresthesias or numbness or tingling to the hands, feet. Altered motor function or altered sensory function.
Is it numbing or what?
Numbness or tingling.
Numbness.
Yeah, funny
You
feelings.
said GCS.
Yeah,
Is that like the Glasgow?
Glasgow Coma Scale.
Is there anything I remember that?
Eyes, verbal, motor, 4, 5, 6, and then you evaluate each one separately. So, do they open their eyes? And then they don't open their eyes at all, they're unresponsive. That's basically the
For
attitude.
dead, they could potentially have a score of 3.
Yes, yes. Dead people have a GCS score of 3. Honestly, it's not something that is very easily commonly remembered. There's cheat cards.
Is there something
I
that's
use a
used
chart.
widely, would you say?
Every patient, every single one of my patient care reports had at least one GCS documented.
Every patient?
Everyone.
And how did you remember that? You
It was in front of me every time. They put a cheat sheet on there.
cheat sheet. Okay.
Where was the cheat sheet?
On the computers, it was there. You just picked. It basically listed all of them, and you picked which one.
And you would decide, oh, they were this, and then it would give you a score.
Yeah, we give you a score. Yes.
Okay.
On the paper sheets, it was there. You basically circled the eyes, verbal, motor components.
Okay. So for us to memorize the whole scoring system.
You will at some point during this course.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Not for this test, but
Not for this test, but at some point in this course, you will know the GCS components. Okay, chest injuries. How about status of neck veins, breath sounds, and heart sounds? Presence or absence of crepitus, subcutaneous air, and paradoxical movement. Extremity injuries, distal skin color, temperature, and presence or absence of distal pulse, motor, and sensory. So you know what CYA is, right?
Cover your ass.
I didn't say it. Good documentation is a reflection of good patient care.
And they also are good CYA too.
Yeah. In some cases, yes. When the patient says, I'm going to sue you, you didn't take care of me, then it's both.
I just don't see how it's not a good CYA. I guess that's so people won't document.
I mean, we
too
should
much.
focus on, documenting because of good patient care.
Yes.
It also is a...
CYA implies that you didn't take care of your patient.
Okay.
Good documentation as a reflection of good patient care implies
So you
that
won't
you
need to
did
have
a good
CYA
job. Yes,
because
because you took care of your patient.
But in essence, aren't you still
Still CYA.
We're getting too deep on this.
2D, come back. So, I'll talk about 2 different documentation formats. SOAP is probably the most common, commonly taught.
I hate it though. It just
I
trying to
know.
remember that
I
crap.
like the chart better or the chat.
Chart's easy.
Yeah.
I like chart. So, subjective is what you see. Objective, or subjective is what you hear. Objective is what you see. Assessment is kind of what your assessment of the patient is, and then the plan is what you did for them. Subjective, like it says, what's told to you, something you can't verify, or measure, or determine on your own. It generally includes mechanism, damage to vehicles and MBCs.
That's something I had a hard time with, wrapping my head around. Including mechanism and damage to vehicles.
I know it's in DVC, right?
Yeah. But is it because you didn't see the accident happen? So you're still, even though you have evidence of what probably did happen, you still don't know exactly
The
why
doctor,
it's subjective?
a doctor at the ER, he said that SOAP technically was like the S could be, it could be fake, it could be real. The O is actually what is real, and then the A is what you see on the page or assessment of the patient. And but it's still, whenever I'm trying to fill out the document or the narrative, just, I don't know that word.
So if I was, for some reason, we were at a stoplight and also we witnessed a wreck, and I saw everything that happened, then we responded and helped, I can technically put the motor vehicle in the objective now because I saw it happen. But most of the time you don't see it happen, so that's why it's subjective.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Like,
I usually think of the subjective as sort of setting the scene. What the patient told you. Basically, how did the patient end up where they are right now? And then objective is more like, okay, where is the patient right now? You know, do they have injuries?
So the patient said they were driving eastbound and they slammed on the brakes and hit it, and then they lost consciousness for a while. And that's your subjective.
Yeah.
And then they are presenting with this, this, and this. That's what. This is what I can see. They had an altered mental state.
Yeah, I'll go through. I forgot I was going to write up an actual patient care report that you could read, but I didn't get a chance to. But I'll go through and talk to you about kind of how I do it and how I was taught. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, okay, so objective information you know is fact. It's data that can be verified, measured, or gathered. What you see, smell, hear, or do in your observations of the scene and the patient. Which is funny because we just said up here, damage and mechanism is going to be an observation of the scene.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and it's funny, I do usually include a description of the vehicles as part of my, like, subjective, but then, like, you know, as far as things about the, you know, the patient was found seated, goes in the objective. Yeah.
So, okay, never mind. I was going to say, patient assessment, like the vitals and stuff before with this one.
Yeah. So that's the thing that, like, this is my chart format I like better. So the impression, the assessment as, it's like the impression of the underlying problem or your diagnosis. It's really like a one-liner. Your vital signs and stuff, that's subjective. Because that's information that you gather. Brief and specific. Your overall assessment of your patient's injuries or illness. That's your assessment. And then your plan, what you've done, what you're planning to do, which realistically you're writing this
Past tense.
past tense. So it's what you did for your patient. On
In other
scene
words,
and in
what you've
route.
done.
Do what?
In other words,
What you've done, yes. Should be in chronological order. It should include the disposition of the patient. So this you're taking your patient to the ER.
We transported the patient to St. David Drill.
Yeah, if that's not documented elsewhere. Yeah. Where the patient went, who received the patient in the report. And the other thing that it doesn't talk about is patient's response to treatment. Yours should go in here as well.
Would that be the objective or the assessment?
I limit my objective to kind of my before I got there assessment, or like my before I did anything
Your
assessment.
general impression?
Well, it's more than my general impression, because it includes like a physical exam, all your physical exam findings.
Okay.
But it's going to be breath sounds before I gave a breathing treatment. I don't start talking about my, like plan. We'll say I gave my patient albuterol. Patient reports improvement. Breath sounds go from wheezing to clear. So that would be part of the plan as well. I like this one better because it's basic. Honestly, it is basically the same thing. It's just formatted in a way that makes more sense. You don't have to remember the difference between subjective and objective. Chief complaint. Patient is a 41-year-old female complaining of chest pain. Patient states that she had chest pain for the past 3 hours, and that she called us because she's never felt anything this bad before. She has a history. She reports a history of 3 heart attacks in the past 3 years. And then you just basically keep talking about, like, what is her story? You put pertinent negatives here as well. Patient denies any nausea, vomiting, dizziness. Because that's what they tell you. Then your assessment. So this is your general impression. I always wrote this as patient was found seated or standing or however they were found, whatever position they were in. ABC is intact, conscious, alert, answers questions appropriately. Assessment shows assessment, and then I would go through my physical exam reveals whatever I found. And I would start with, head, eyes, ears, nose, throat, neck, back, chest, abdomen, pelvis, GI, GU, and extremities. And go through the whole list of systems. Any diagnostic site tests, so D-stick, genitourinary. Any diagnostic tests, D-stick, pulse ox, Untitled. Your diagnostic test, your field diagnostic, same thing. RX, that's basically your plan, what you did. Any standing orders that you followed. If you gave, albuterol or nitroglycerin, aspirin. and anything online. I called for an order for fentanyl for my patient, and the doctor said I could get this much per doctor, whoever, get the doctor's name.
You assist any ones, or you seen them, I can just like follow along, besides what, exactly what I said, but as
Per protocol,
yeah, per protocol.
or per standing orders. And then what happened in transport? So, patient moved to the ambulance, secured the stretcher, and albuterol continued en route. Patient reports improvement, and then, whatever your ongoing assessment is. Basically the same thing as SOAP. Basically.
We do this one. When we
I like
call
it
it
better.
chat,
Yeah.
instead of RX, we have 2 T's for
Oh, yeah.
treatment and transport.
Yeah.
Well, this one, like, you could actually sit down and write that crap out,
Mhm.
or like write it out verbatim, okay, right?
Yeah.
Versus SOAP, you actually have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's laid out here
It's
for you.
quick.
Yeah, this one,
Yeah.
and like I said, it basically yields the same result.
It makes more sense.
It does. So I like chart better.
So you do, I'm on D-chart.
Do what?
Dispatch, D-chart, dispatch.
The dispatch information for me was always recorded elsewhere, so. Yeah. Questions? Let's take a break. I gotta pull up some videos so we can practice documentation and radio reports.
All right then. So how long did it take